Hello and welcome back to Mana on the Rocks. It is I, your bald host, Joe. Joining me today, I have my wonderful co-host, Atlas.
Hello, everyone.
And today, we got a fun one. We're talking about deck building philosophy. What would Aristotle play in Commander? I don't know. I can't think of any other philosophers, but I'm sure that they would enjoy playing Wizard Squares with the boys. So come on down, have a drink.
So, deck building philosophies. I'm not. It's a it's a very broad topic.
Yeah, I had issues kind of brainstorming it the other day, just like, okay, well, what are like deck building philosophy topics? Like what does that mean? I have like kind of a list of stuff.
Okay, what are those ideas? Because I'd love to hear what you have.
So I have like just things I wrote down. Singular win cons versus multiple win cons, synergistic cards and staples, choosing your win con, how much tech is too much tech, dorks versus rocks, what slash how many light slash asymmetrical stacks pieces are available to the given deck. Are there niche or synergistic interaction pieces that are available for your particular strategy? A plus B combos and layered versus just A plus B combos, and then what changes do you consider when building something that's aggro, mid range, or control?
So let's start with that one. What makes a player want to build aggro, mid range, or control? So as we've talked about a couple of things in the past about how like people have different play styles, and
Mm-hmm.
it comes up in our discussions when we chit chat about like, oh, I'm thinking about including this card, or I want to play this deck with this type of play, and we talk about how like some people perform better using this style of deck versus that style of deck, based upon what their typical play patterns are, like what their default personality like shifts to. So I'm a little bit of an anime nerd. So I was comparing it with one of our other friends, when we were one of these days, most recently when we were breaking it down, and we brought it up to for anyone who's familiar with Hunter x Hunter.
Ooh, baby.
Basically,
Ooh, baby.
they have yeah, right,
Yeah.
yeah. But they have these like magic power things that they can do. But you have like different schools of magic. Um, uh,
Yeah,
and so it's called
yeah, there are
Nen.
six
But yeah,
different like overarching types of essentially magic that you have available to you.
yep. And you have a innate like biological disposition that you're born with, and you can learn stuff from other schools, but you'll never quite be as good with those other schools' magic as you will with whatever your predisposition is, right? And so it was funny because we were comparing that. We are like, man, I wish there was just a test that you could take, because there's like a test you can take with a glass of water in the show or
Water
whatever that tells you
divination.
what your predisposition is. Yeah, water divination, that's what it's called. And so, but we were like, wouldn't it be cool if we could just take a test and figure out what our predispositions are to play for deck archetypes, whether it's like control, like mid range, like control stacks, mid range, or turbo fast decks. And wouldn't that be really neat? Because those all play a little differently, and people all have like certain like unconscious leanings that they have. So that was one of the things that we were talking about when we were getting started on this discussion about like deck building philosophies and play styles
Hmm.
and things like that.
And it definitely like choosing that overarching like archetype influences a lot of your decisions. So like if you're playing, I guess so the issue with like kind of the usual like card game triangle, as it were, of control, aggro, and mid range is aggro is not quite what it is in like 60 card formats. You think aggro
Yeah,
in
very different or almost
very
non-existent.
different to non-existent, or it attacks on a completely different axis that is unique to Commander specifically, just because the way to go fast in Commander is hardly ever creature beats. It's occasionally creature beats. It's like commonly in like certain strategies, think like Zada, Winota, though Yuriko to some extent. Those decks I would classify as aggro, but also in a world where it's turbo, I'd consider that like like a specifically turbo tuned like Rog Silas or pick a Grixis deck that's like skewed towards aggro or skewed towards comboing ASAP, trying to run out their Gnaws. I would also consider that kind of under the umbrella of aggro. So in
Definitely.
aggro specifically, I think is so underexplored and underdeveloped just because it attacks on a completely unique axis. Instead of 20 life on your opponents, there is 120 life that you have to deal with, or you have to be able to navigate through excuse me, through like heavy interaction, or the prevalence of stacks changes that entirely.
I would definitely consider like the only two like I guess I can think of three aggro decks, as it were, off the top of my head, and these are the only ones that I can think of. Are Winota for
Yep,
sure, because she's just
100%.
gonna beat the fuck out of you. Your life total becomes zero as soon as possible, and you can't take any game actions through her
Nope.
stacks. Then there was Yuriko, which also it's unique because it's like it's reducing your life total through a triggered ability versus like actually hitting you, but it is trying to reduce your life total from 40 to zero as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
But it's a little, I wouldn't quite call it aggro because it's a little more unique. It's more of like a tempo style where you're sticking one thing and that one thing is Yuriko, and then you're just riding those triggers to victory, getting them every turn and playing control in the meanwhile. So it's like more of like a tempo in the traditional sense.
It's very close to like Legacy Delver in a way.
Yeah, in a way, for sure. And then the last one I could think of would be like Najila. Is like that's not really like what she aims to do
That's no,
necessarily,
that's true, but that's like a huge like
but that's like
that's like a
yeah, that is her
that's a
game plan.
huge plan B. Like if you're not able to stick something early or you're able to get like some crazy advantage early, like your game plan is turning
Make
sideways with
warrior hit.
Najila. What's the math like?
Make warrior hit.
What's the math like? I think like 5 or 6 combats with Najila kills the table.
I think yeah, if you're
Yeah,
uninterrupted,
uninterrupted.
and we're gonna get harassed by an Agila player who knows better than us out there. But
I'm
if
pulling
you're
numbers out my
uninterrupted, I
ass.
think after your first swing, you only need to take 4 extra combats. Off the top of my head, I think that's correct. I think you need 4 extra combats to assign
Hmm.
lethal. If no one interacts with any of your warriors, if no one blocks anything, I think you need 4, right? Because it goes attack, you get 4 damage, and 2 guys. Attack, you get 4 guys and 8 damage. That's 2 combats, and then attack again, you get 8 guys, and one player can is should be at like what? That's like 4, 8, 12, so 20. So another player. Okay, so I guess it's 5 or 6.
Yeah,
It's probably five
because
or six.
it's exponential starting at 2. Najila makes the math a little different just because it's not a value of 1 that you're working with; it's a value of 3. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think exponentially, what 2. I'm not going to do the math right now. We're not.
yeah. And not different place,
Yeah,
different time. But I think it's
we're not.
5. It should be 5 or
Yeah,
6,
but like roughly 5 to 6 combats will get you there.
and that's from 40. If people are lower, they can die much sooner.
Absolutely, and then so many other things can interrupt that. But yeah, and that's just like the aggro style of things. But even still, like under the aggro umbrella, like you're going to choose different like forms of interaction specifically versus something like control. I see like a lot of mid range or even slightly control decks playing cards like Dispel and Miscast. And while I don't hate the idea of Miscast, I think Dispel is mostly like a turbo card. Like that is specifically a card that you run to protect your breach and your Adnaz specifically to me.
I don't know. As a control player, I've really liked Dispel when you're fighting turbo decks because they're like, "Oh yeah, I'll dispel this," and you're like,
Oh
"Oh,
yeah,
dispel
and
your
that's and
spell."
that
Or it's
yeah,
like most of Dispel hits most of the turbo players' win conditions.
true,
So
true.
I don't know. I've liked it
And not to say like this card can only be run in the most hardcore of turbo
for
Nod
sure, for
strategies, but like
sure.
I feel like there are more flexible options that you're going to be able to move into rather than Dispel. I think it's a great card, but like I just don't think it's. I think they're
I don't
at this
know.
point, especially with like offer you can't refuse, they're just better options.
Card's so good. I can't believe people are like, "Oh, giving your opponents 2 mana. That's
Hey, I was
terrible." When
I
that
was
card
one of
was
those
first
people.
spoiled, I
What
was like, "Oh, this will be bad card.
God.
Not Swan Song. Creatures are useless, but treasures are so good." Yeah, but the treasures aren't good if they have no spells
And that's
resolving.
and that's the thing. Like it's really good in counterspell wars. Like it's very good in counterspell wars, dependently. But it's one of those cards that you get blown out of it like twice in a row, like I did. Like 2 times back to back, I cast the spell, and either that gave them the mana to have the follow up, or that gave them the extra mana they needed to counter the thing that we were fighting over. And I'm just like, oh, this card feels like doo doo. But they're
I feel like it's always
go for it.
I would say I feel like it's always the last counter spell that you use in the war, or it's the first one. I don't feel like you usually use it in between very
No, no.
much,
I
if at
think
all
I think if you're in a
possible.
counterspell war, it's like awful as your second or third counter.
Yeah,
But like,
it's like you cap the fight and they have no cards
yeah.
left, or you start and try and bait them into using that mana so you can like flusterstorm them or
Mhm,
something after the
mhm.
fact.
Yeah, but like I think the spell is a fine enough card. I think that we have more options of interaction, especially depending on the deck. Like there is a whole breadth of interaction that you can make use of. And then there's cards like Miscast. That card is just a turbo card to me.
I hate that card. Every time I've cast that card, it's either like it's just a spell pierce because they only have 1 mana
Mhm.
anyways, which is fine. Like that's good. But either it's a spell pierce that only hits as a sorceries, or they can pay for it and it just doesn't
Yeah.
matter. But I think on the whole, I would much rather play Spell Pierce than Miscast because it's really narrow. That extra 1 mana, they're either having 1 or 3 mana usually because of the way that we can talk about magic numbers in CEDH on a different episode. But usually it's 1 or 3 mana or something higher. 2 isn't really super important, so
No.
they either pay for it or they don't. There's not really Miscast doesn't provide anything special. It's very limiting too.
To me, it's the fact that it only hits 2 card types. Granted, they are 2 of the most represented card types in the format, and I think that there is merit to that point. But then you're staring down a breach, and your only counter spell in hand is a miscast. You're like, Spell Pierce would have at least taxed mana here. Um, it would have
Been there.
made the breach turn a little bit tighter. So I'm just like, I have never personally sleeved up a miscast. In the times that I have played a deck that it has it, I'm just like, this card feels so medium.
I played it a little bit when it first got printed because it wasn't bad for 1 mana
No,
counter
no.
spell, but then Offer got spoiled and immediately Miscast came out of all of my decks and Offer went in.
Yeah, I think at this point there is just not much of a good reason unless you're like blue red. But even then, I feel like there are other like more interesting spells you could play. Maybe not efficient, but also I think there are cards that are just going to prove themselves to be more worth it over miscast.
Well, once again, Spell Pierce because
Yeah,
like that also hits like someone casts a Null Rod on 2 or whatever and has no extra mana. You're like, oh, Spell Pierce that. Miscast doesn't hit Null Rod.
yeah. It stops. It stops like true rule. It stops like enchantment rule of laws. It stops Bolus's Citadel. It stops, I don't know, random gotcha pieces. It stops birthing pods. That's a pretty big one for us.
That's
That's
huge.
Yeah,
That's
being
huge.
able to
Yeah,
stop birthing pod
we
is
have a lot of that
huge.
in our meta.
Kind of moving on to like the mid range argument. I feel like mid range it's such the wild west of CDH. You
That's
can
the,
play anything and call yourself mid range. People will go, yeah, that seems
yeah.
fine. That seems good
If
enough.
you're not trying to win the game consistently on turn 2, yeah, you're a mid range
Yeah,
deck. Unless you're playing like dedicated stacks, and then you're a stacks deck.
yeah.
Everything is mid
Everything is
range.
mid
I'm
range.
going to play Tim to Malcolm. I'm playing mid range. I'm going to play a Kenrith deck. I'm playing mid range. Even though I'm also running Ad Nauseum. I'm going to play Calavex. Oh, I'm mid range.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's all mid range. It's just so broad. And I think that's one of the things. Is like mid range means a very specific thing in 60 card formats, and because there's such a breadth of different like ways to play different speeds and stuff in EDH. It's like that term is very vague, and it's a lot more useful to sort of like break things down into I'm a control list, or I'm playing like a fast combo list, or a slower combo list, or something that is like something that was going around for a little while. People were using the terms like proactive, reactive, things like that, and those terms I thought those were pretty good. They caught on for a little bit, but I haven't heard them in a
Yeah,
while.
they've
So
definitely fallen out of favor as we've as I've coined it, swirled towards the mid range singularity, where everything is mid range. Any deck that you will create will become mid range. Anything that is mid range will not escape mid range. Mid range is all. You just can't escape it. There's nothing else besides mid range.
it's just so good. I'm gonna stick my thing that beats you down 2 damage at a time, but also draws me a card every time you take a game egg.
Yeah, no, mid range is it's just generally a good spot to be. Just with the way CDH and Commander as a whole like fluctuates table to table, and composition to pod composition, like having those tools that are super flexible in a variety of different environments and game states is so huge, and it lends itself to the mid range strategy specifically. I'll pull on the most classic example of mid range, Boomer Jund, one of my favorite decks of all time. Yeah, I don't play modern anymore, if you couldn't tell. No, but like genuinely, there are hands that you just go, cool. I need to keep every interaction spell in the world to try and stop you from winning, and then eventually I'm just going to find a Tarmogoyf and I'm going to turn it sideways I'm going to turn it sideways 5 or 6 times, and you're going to die. And my cards are just higher quality than you. Like whatever you're doing cannot beat a Tarmogoyf backed up with a Liliana after I've thought seized you.
I think that's where we got the idea from mid range, sort of like that high card quality threshold in ADH, where it's like I'm playing a lot of really good, really versatile spells,
Mhm.
and I'm playing like a 4 or 5 color shell.
Yeah, no, and that's become a lot of the like templates and blueprints of EDH. which is funny because going into control, I feel like you need that template that, like, okay, these are the things that we need to look out for. That control is able to specifically prey upon, and not to say that control can't function, but I think control is very much a player skill rather than a deck building philosophy and choice. I think that there, I
It's
think
so
it's
hard.
so hard, but I think, and there are commanders and decks out there that lend itself to controlling strategies very, very well. Recently,
Thrasios, for
Thrasios,
example.
for example. I've personally been on Calamax recently, and what Calamax lets you do is guarantee that you get one counter spell through on every person's turn if necessary. Now, granted, it doesn't really happen every single time, because as any blue loving player wants to try and do in CDH, you're not going to have the gas to be able to stop everybody on their turns. However, if you can guarantee at least one of your counter spells resolves, that's usually good enough. And having varied forms of interaction lets you be able to interact on different axes. So playing a lot more removal, or it just helps out.
And you're two for oneing
And
every
you're
time you cast
you're
those
two for
interaction
wanting, and you're
spells.
able to recoup that cost by a bevy of really high quality instant speed cantrips. Things like impulse. I'm gonna look at the top 8 and pick two. That's dig through time. Dig through time. I'm gonna look at the top 14 and pick four. I mean, even something as simple as a thrill of possibility, like trading 2 cards for 4 cards, is pretty good. But every single time I see the topic of control propped up, it's usually centered around a deck list, and I don't think that is the correct way to view it. Being able to politic your table, being able to assess the threats, being able to explain your threat assessment and get other people to see your threat assessment, that's where control shines in CDH. I don't think it's necessarily in the cardboard, it's in the holder of the cardboard.
Absolutely. I think that's a really big part of it is when you put your counter spell on the stack, or you put your silence on the stack or something like that, and people are going, "Oh my god, they're trying to win the
These
game." And
lightning
you're
rod
like,
things.
"Yeah, exactly." And it's like, "Well, I'm silencing on their turn, like I'm just trying to stop them." Or maybe you're silencing on your turn because you know you have a silver bullet for somebody who's sitting across the table from you, but you know they have a counter spell because of a git probe or they misclicked for it or something. You're like, "I'm silencing now so I can guarantee this resolves." And sometimes it's that style of like, I'm just going to show you like X number of cards from my hand, just set them on the table and be like, these are going to be my game actions. This is what I'm going to do. I would appreciate it if you two people don't interact with me or try and back my play here so I can stop like person C from winning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big part of control. It's just like you said, getting other people to see the assessments that you are making, and then also being willing to be told that like you're wrong, and then waiting that information. Like if you're like, I am going to be casting a Path to Exile like on your end step, and I want to target the because we're playing at Comp REL here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to target this Collector Roof. Anyone see a reason why I don't shouldn't exile the Collector because it unlocks my Soul Ring and my Mana Crypt, and I really want to use those. But if you guys want to fight me on this, that's fine. I don't think that it puts me in a game-winning position, even though it unlocks 4 mana. Like maybe I'll be able to activate my Thrasios one extra time per turn or something. Um, or like, is there something that I'm missing? Like, is there? Do we know that somebody has a Chord of Calling in hand? There's a lot of Dockside fodder on the field. Am I throwing by exiling this? Things like that, I think, are a really strong tool in a control player's
Yeah,
arsenal in
because
CDH.
it's being able. I just thought of this. It's being able to control the information, not necessarily the cards. Like
Absolutely,
that's
yeah.
that's
That
that's
is
where the
that
control
is
has to shine.
truly
Because even with stuff like that, like even just getting someone else's perspective of like, okay, I'm not personally sniffing out anything. Like who's smelling something,
yeah,
that kind of deal. Like I'm not seeing anyone in anything. Is anyone else picking up vibes that I am missing? And
absolutely.
that's so huge.
Information really is because if you look at it, one of the comparisons that I like to make to sometimes to people, mostly just in my head, is I like to compare CDH to Risk, where it's
Okay.
like, and Risk is a little different because most of the information's on the board, but it's like it's global powers fighting, right? You got your 4 nations, you got your 4 kingdoms, whatever. They're attacking each other. And they're getting little skirmishes, they're getting into full on wars, but everybody's trying to end up being the global superpower, right?
Mhm.
And so that's why we call it politicking, is your little nations and you're trying to negotiate with one another and make deals and make sure that like everyone is like allied on the correct side that you want them to be on, things like that. And and if you look at like national intelligence agencies and stuff, they're the intelligence agencies. That's where all the power is. If you control the information, like you said, control the information, you control the game.
Yeah, and that's consistent across, like, I think any major CDH tournament. You hear all about these, silver-tongued whiz kids that, are able to do very well, even if, like, I don't know, community thinks that deck is mid or whatever. I was listening. I haven't listened to the CDH podcast in a while, but I started venturing out and just trying to see, like, okay, what are some other names out there that I haven't listened to? I started listening to Sad the other day, and they're talking about a particular slicer player and just how good they were at politicking their own slicer. I'm like, yeah, no, I can see that. It's a potent threat that is going to reward someone from being able to control their permanent on other people's turns very well.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna get very far with that, and that's kind of. But you can take that like little nugget of information, kind of spread it to whatever deck and whatever playstyle that you want to do.
Yeah, give somebody else the information, but give them just enough rope to hang themselves.
Absolutely, and that's where the great players shine, is being able to give people that rope and being able to just tie the noose and have them step right into it and think, oh yeah, no, this is a nice tie that I'm putting on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a great example would be I mentioned silence earlier, but if you silence someone else's like game winning play, or it looks like it's game winning, if you have an instant speed win, just go for it under protection over the top of their win after it's already been stopped. But everyone let you resolve a
After all the
silence.
interaction is come out, because
Yep.
silence is one of those cards that you have to go, team, what's happening here? Like, if this
Yeah.
resolves, like,
Yeah.
we're locked out. So if we have to fight,
Put my
we have to fight now.
power
Yeah.
artifact. Yeah, put my power artifact on the stack, targeting my grid monolith. You're like, in response,
Yeah.
silence? And everyone's like, all right, sure, yeah. Maybe there's a counter spell. Everyone fights to keep the silence resolving. And then silence resolves. Cool. Court of Calling. Calamex trigger. Oh.
Disgusting.
Not that you can cast silence in Calamex, but
Well,
that type of deal.
I've Narset reversaled it.
Oh,
I don't think I'm currently
God.
on Narset's reversal.
That's
Yeah,
disgusting.
no, I like Narset's reversal in the deck. I keep swapping around that particular slot in the deck. I am on Remand currently, and then the thought hit me like, wait, this card doesn't work with Calamax the way I want it to. So it's probably going to come out for a different counter spell. But one of the things that we touched on in our first episode, win cons, I think, is a huge part of the deck building kind of philosophy. I'm a big believer in your commanders dictate so much of what your win cons should look like, to an almost frightening degree. I think any commander that's able to make use of a like particularly unique win con is generally, like, on some level, a decent idea.
Malcolm.
Malcolm, for example, I think is a fantastic example of that. Glinthorn Buccaneer is a throwaway rare from, I think, M21, but with Malcolm specifically in the command zone, Malcolm's a one card. It essentially makes that deck a one card combo pile. And
Mm-hmm.
then you stack that on with other commonly used win cons, and like that's how most of the Malcolm X decks operate, is through that particular philosophy, and it's such a potent strategy that
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of decks borrow that philosophy from, because I think a lot of people really want to play their Timnas and their Chroms. Thrasios gets a pass here because it is an outlet in the command zone, and same thing with Jessica too. Commanders that are outlets in the command zone are also just very, very powerful, because if you're a deck that wants to make infinite mana, or at least a very large amount of it, those commanders are going to at the very least be your value outlets for spilt over mana, or your way to find your actual way to win the game. Usually, like, I don't know, pick an A plus B combo in a color that works. Be that, Thoracle Consult, Twin Flame Dualcaster, Saw Dualcaster, those kinds of things.
Absolutely. I and just because a commander dictates your win condition doesn't necessarily mean that your win condition is dependent on that
No,
commander,
no.
right? So like talked about Thrasios, and once again we'll talk about sinks are a little different, but those they're gonna make infinite mana and they're gonna sink it to the command zone. There are tons of other things you can do with infinite mana other than sink it to the command zone. You can Exa Finale for 300. You can you can use in the old days we would use buyback spells. You make infinite mana and you like buy back your capsize, or whatever, so no stick of permanent
Personally,
again.
I've been looking at capsize, and I'm just like, this card's kind of spicy.
Dude, that card slaps.
I hate that it's 3 mana, but I also kinda like it. It's just in that sweet spot where it's a lot of mana, but if you're able to, like, I don't know, double it, dinosaur maybe? It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
So you're paying 6, you're getting 2 capsizes, and you get to capsize again next time you have mana.
Disgusting. Just
Yeah,
disgusting.
so you're paying for both your you're just casting
You're just
both of your
casting 2 of them,
capsizes.
and it's generally gonna
Yeah,
be
that's all you're doing.
uncounterable because who's gonna waste 2 counter spells on a capsize?
Yeah. God, the dinosaur's so
Yeah,
gross.
no, I love the dinosaur. It's great. I saw I looked I looked this morning because I wanted to see what the list on the database has been doing. It has been moved off and into the outdated section.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily because the list isn't unviable by any
No,
stretch,
God
but they
no.
have that requirement about like
It's
if it's not
it,
updated in X amount of
yeah,
time.
no, it's I'm pretty sure it fell to like it just not being upkept, but I also don't fucking care what's on the database and what's not on the database. Well, I
Yeah.
care enough to stroke my ego a little bit and kind of drive me forward, but truthfully, I do not care about what is on the database or not.
We can save the database talk for another episode.
We
That's just a rant
Yeah,
session.
that's a whole rant session. But no, I was just curious because I was just kind of looking for ideas. Like, is there like other things that I'm not considering? Actually, that's a great segue. My version of Calamax is substantially different than what was on like the database proper. The database proper build is very focused on getting intuition out to make use of very insane breach piles because with Calmax you get to look at 3 cards twice and pick 2 of them, one for each intuition. So you set up some stupid piles, usually by abusing a lot of regrowth type effects to make your quote unquote true piles, um, which I think is a decent way to build the deck. However, I think there are a lot of better cards to be playing that are just overlooked. Paradise Lost kind of fills the slot for all of those regrowth effects very well, and it's in 1 card, and it frees up like 6 slots for the deck to run more mid-range pieces, more combo pieces, more control pieces.
Hey, mid range.
Yeah, like it just more slots. And I think the Breach version is very good at utilizing Intuition as a 1 card win pile, but you lose a lot of that flexibility and a lot of that deck building slot.
Well, because you have a 1 card win pile with just one
Yeah, no,
card.
chord lines. There are several lines that the deck is able to make use of. Two primarily. One is through getting Dualcaster Twin Flame by doing shenanigans with the chord on the stack. The other kind of assembles Spellseeker Kitten combos, and it's just a very different way to play the deck. But they diverge from different deck building philosophies of okay, we're going to use intuition as just a really good 1 card win pile that's very mana efficient, and finding breach one of the most commonly used ways to win the game, versus me, which is more reactive, more creature based, more interaction focused.
It's that step one, step two,
It's
right? We
that
were
step
talking about that last
it's the step
episode.
one, step two. Everything ties together to each other.
Yeah, if you're you can focus your deck on either performing step 2 after you perform a very short step 1, or you can like tune your deck towards more of like performing a more extended step 1 to make sure you don't lose the
Mhm.
game, and then you can dedicate a very few number of resources to actually winning.
Yeah, and that whole like divergence of that is the whole reason why I at least try to be very open when it comes to just deck ideas in general. Just because another commander is able to do something quote unquote better doesn't mean that there isn't merits to what you're trying to present. You're presenting a new idea, something that may or may not be explored or understood as much. That doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't have merit, and
Absolutely.
that's half the reason why I wanted to start this podcast. Is because I think that there are a lot of ideas that deserve to be explored and deserve to be understood. But everyone goes, but my partner commanders drop me a million cards in the command zone and also win the game. So why would I want to play Sloppy Bile Piper in the command zone or whatever? But did
So I'm gonna tie something into that.
Yeah, go
If
for it, go for it.
I'm gonna This tickled me. I think it's either Thursday or Friday. I saw this. So I troll around in the Kenrith Discord, and I joined it a couple like last year, mid year sometime. Joined
Something like that,
it
yeah.
right as Displacer Kitten was getting spoiled because I was curious. I was like, oh, what if there's some tech floating around with this card? And I was the first person to ask any questions about that card that I saw. And I was immediately I was playing at the time. I was playing it with like Spellseeker. I was playing a couple of other piles like with Trinket Mage,
Oh yeah,
so I could
this
play
was
like
version
Tormod script
one.
lines and stuff. Yeah, version 1. And I was told that I should not be playing Displacer Kitten, because it was a 4 mana card that didn't does nothing.
quote unquote.
You have to have another card in play for it to do anything. It's easy to interact with, and it's just very inefficient. Okay. And then I was literally told I should be running Wheel of Fortune instead of Displacer Kitten. They were like, cut Trinket Mage, that card sucks, which I don't disagree with. I was running it for a while because there's some cool lines that you can do with it. At the time in our meta, we had a lot of Rule of Law running around, so playing lines that could be played on a delayed timer were really strong. Permanent based strategies were really good. But I was told to cut Displacer Kitten because Wheel is better. I was like, whoa, I don't know about that.
Oh
Got
god,
very
are we
salty.
are we, are we gonna bring up Wheel of Fortune now? Because that's a card that is defined by the philosophy of the deck that you're going for.
Oh, well, we can talk about it in 1 second. Let me
Yeah, go
finish.
for it.
I
Go
was
for
just
it. Go
going to
for it.
say, so cut forward to later that same year, so last year, end of the year, I rejoined the Discord, just started just like lurking, reading other people's stuff, because honestly, like all of the server Discords for established decks are toxic. I've been in a couple of them, and it's a lot of like what you were saying, established strategy, and if you're diverging, you're dumb. Until there's like something that's been posted, then all of a sudden, oh, why aren't you playing this? If you're not playing this, you're dumb. It's like, okay, whatever. Anyways, now everyone's on Displacer Kitten with some variety of or another of line, whether it's a Dockside line, whether it's a Teferi line, whether it's this, that thing, or the other thing. Something else that I had seen other people bring up was Deadeye Navigator. Really good card. Has a lot of utility, very strong. I had seen this card get shot down by a bunch of people in the Kenrith Discord as suboptimal. Like, you could play it, it neoforms off your commander, I guess it's okay, but it's not very good. Why would you play that when you could just play Emiel instead? Anyways, cut to last week. Last week, beginning of the week, I see a line that says, Emiel does nothing. I've cut it from my list. I'm replacing it with Deadeye Navigator. Emiel's just a dead card. It's bad. Something that I have been saying for literally over a year. Since Displacer was printed, I was like, Emiel's a bad 4 mana card. It does nothing, requires you to spend 3 mana, and have another thing to flicker. Crazy thing about Displacer Kitten, it doesn't get removed because it can flicker itself if you have a spell to interact with.
Yeah, it's easy to remove.
Flickers rocks.
If you have the
like,
counter spell, I guess.
Like, it's just a useful card. It's a much more useful card, and if you're desperate, it pitches to force. Emiel doesn't do that. Best thing it's got going for it is it's a 4/4. Kitten can't compete, I guess.
That's a relevant stat line sometimes.
It is a relevant stat line, but not as much as like winning the game and your card being good generically, right? Anyways, that was at the beginning of the week. Cut to the end of the week. Same people. I have cut Deadeye Navigator from my list, all in on cat lines. Deadeye Navigator was not doing enough, and I'm just like, holy shit. Didn't I say this like over a year ago at this point? Displacer Kitten's just better, right?
You came to us and you're like, I'm feeling a lot of emotions right now. I got told my deck is garbage, even though it's very much not. I like the Wheel of Fortune line is something that we still meme about today.
It is an iconic meme in our group.
It is such a good meme because
somebody would be playing a card that we're like mid on and be like, just play Wheel of Fortune instead.
Why are you on a Wheel of Fortune? Oh god, Wheel of Fortune. As a Rakdos player, that card, you either live by that card or you either die by that card. I don't know. Wheels are a card archetype, I guess. There's like 3 playable wheels.
Wheel of Fortune,
Windfall, Twister,
slash Echo of Aeons if you're playing no proxy or if there's a reason to like have flashback or whatever.
And Wheel of Misfortune to some degree as well.
Wheel of Misfortune
and Dark
is like
Deal?
I wouldn't even call that a wheel necessarily. It's like card draw. Dark Deal. Esper. I've seen some builds with Dark Deal and Esper recently. Or even Rakdos. I've seen a couple people on Dark Deal.
Like 4 to 6 wheel cards.
And then if you count Memory Jar as a wheel, that card's also played.
True. Matt.
Time Spiral's fallen out of favor a lot because it's hard to get to 6 mana.
Yeah.
It gets countered, so you don't untap your land.
It needs a mana drain, and on average, you're only ever untapping like 3 lands with it, so you're not really getting the full benefit of it, unless you're like a diehard like High Tide deck. Even then, I feel like there are better cards to probably run that spot. But anyway, like commonly, like 3 or so played wheels. But my whole gripe and grievance with wheels is you have to be set up to take advantage of them in so many ways, because it's a card that asks you, do you understand your step 1 to step 2?
Yeah, where's your transition
point? Your transition point? Because if you are wheeling and passing, you are throwing the game.
Truly.
Very few times have I seen wheel pass and the person who cast the wheel won. Usually it is their seat 2 or their seat 3 that ends up winning that turn cycle.
Yep.
Or you're doing wheel breach lines, in which case, congratulations, your breach resolved and you have your pieces out. It didn't matter what you were going to do with that breach. These are just the cards that you happen to throw in the deck to make that breach line work.
Yeah.
Breach lines and mana stinks at the command zone operate in similar brain space for me because they function the same. Like if they're going to get there, they're gonna get there. It doesn't really matter how you get there. Like they're gonna cross the finish line. Your sync at the command zone, barring Jessica, which is a true win con in the command zone, like Thrasios, for example, will find you the thing that actually puts the win on the stack.
Whether it's a repeated bolt or an overrunning
Or,
finale or
or,
something
or
like
like
that.
any other like naturally occurring win con that you have in the deck.
Exactly. And I think it's really important to note that even with those breach wheel lines, like because we have a Timna Jessica
Mhm.
player in our meta, and they have it in that they have that line, or at least they did in a couple of
They never
variations of
go
the deck.
for it. They never go for it.
I don't think I've ever seen them cast a wheel like and then try and breach with that unless they're under silence or rage captain or something like that
Yeah.
already. Like almost never.
Again, in which
Um,
case you are going to get there regardless.
Exactly. Like there's no such thing as that unprotected win, and that's why protection spells are in such a good spot right
Very,
now. Like
very
they're
good.
truly at a
Very,
premium.
very
I saw
good.
somebody playing Mandate of Peace at the last tournament I played, and it was, or I guess it was 2 tournaments ago, but somebody played Mandate of Peace against me, and I was blown away because I had completely forgotten about that card. They're like, I'm gonna attack with my Timna. They were playing Timna Armix. They're like, I'm gonna attack with my Timna. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Draw my card. Draw my card. Go to leave combat. Before I leave
What
combat,
the hell? This card
Mandate of
seems
Peace.
crazy for Timna decks right now.
Yeah, for anyone who's not familiar with it, it is a silence for 1 and 1 white. It ends the combat step. It can only be cast during combat, and it silences your opponents. It's insane, especially in a deck that's like low on interaction on the stack. Fantastic way to protect your win. It also deletes Kiki combos, can delete Najila players combos. It actually interacts really well with a lot of stuff. It could keep you alive if you're being swung at for lethal. It if something is on the stack during combat, if you could find a way to bait out somebody else's attempted something, you can end the combat step,
Mm-hmm.
which then exiles everything off the stack. So Mandate of Peace actually never goes to the graveyard because it gets exiled as it resolves. But it's just one of those cards where it's like, this card synergizes with my list really well because I'm in black and white and can't really interact on the stack. But you know what I can do? I can protect the hell out of my win.
Mm-hmm.
They were also on like Urza's Battlethopter, like Shimmermere type lines, so they could also
Whoa.
win, like add instant speed. So like in your combat, do that whole like win instant speed thing. In your combat, Mandate of Peace, end the turn. You do not get Timna
Damn.
draws.
This guy was
I'm
cooking.
gonna exile this. Your second main phase, I'm gonna flash in Liberator, Urza's Battlethopter, which is just Shimmermere, but also you can cast colorless spells. And I'm gonna win the game with whatever my loop happens to be. I think they were on like Walking Ballista and Bomberman lines, which is sweet because that does go off at instant speed. If you can cast the Ellidiot with
Mm-hmm.
Flash, like I'll make infinite mana and then I'll flash out my Ballista X equals 1,000,000 and kill you all. Sweet deck,
That's
sweet
very
deck.
sweet. Also, pulling out some old school reconnaissance tech. Your end of combat is still part of combat, so
Oh yeah,
you can get your
absolutely.
Timna draw because you hit, and then after damage is declared, there is an end of combat step. You can act during the
Yep.
end of combat step and end the combat.
Oh, that brings me into Necromancy tech, but we'll cover that at a different time. But
Yeah,
that's a sweet
that's
card I've started
yeah,
exploring.
that's you presented that tech to me. I'm just like, holy shit, this card is wilder than I thought it was.
It's pretty insane.
Yeah,
But we'll cover that one a different time. That's like a deck tech episode right there.
that is a deck tech episode right there. So okay, if we're in the realm of win cons and deck building philosophy, I mean the A plus B and layered debate is ever ongoing.
True, very true. There's a lot of decks out there that'll just like basically pack all of their win cons in there. Like what is it? A lot of Kenrith players say the deck is win con tribal, which it more or less is.
True, true.
You're playing every win con that you can possibly fit into your strategy most of the
Hmm.
time. Most of the lists do. And then you and since because a lot of pieces layer, you'd be like, yes, I'll use my LED and my Lurrus and my Deadeye Navigator to go make infinite mana and win the game. Because you can LED cracks for 3, you can cast it with Lurrus's ability, you crack the LED for 3 more, you flicker the Lurrus, and then you recast it because it's a new Lurrus, right? So there's pretty cool tech there, like Displacer Kitten-esque tech with that. Or you can like use a Dockside and a Deadeye Navigator, or you can use a Lurrus and a Displacer Kitten and a Petal or an LED to make infinite mana, or you can like Breach and all these other things, right? Or you can just play really, really concentrated win conditions and focus all of your resources on getting there as fast as possible, or making sure nobody else can get there before you do, where you're playing like Thoracle Consults and that's it. There are a number of decks that I've seen where it's just like Thoracle Consult, maybe a Lab Man, or a Breach Package or something like that. It's like one of those, like maybe 2 win conditions that are separate. Some of them, like Dimir lists mostly, because their commanders don't really, for the most part, have secondary win conditions that can be very specific to the
Or
commander,
good enough.
and they don't have access to red. They're just like, we are on full send Thoracle, and it's going to be either as fast as we possibly can,
Or you're not
or we're going to
resolving
play
anything into me right
yeah,
now.
we're going to play a really hard, like no, like control style game.
And I think that whole like A plus B in the layered like debate, that kind of is the heart of the of, like, at least to me, deck building philosophy. Because I pretty much every deck that I draft up, I make sure I have at least some form of 2-card combo, whatever that is. But these 2 cards, if they find each other, they win the game. If those cards are generic enough and have enough utility, even better. I will usually opt for that package. Hashtag Sawn Half better than Twin Flame in
I
anything
agree.
that can play Sawn Half and and Dual Caster, just straight up.
My only regret is that Spellseeker does not
Oh
grab Saw
god,
Half.
just give me the 3 mana. Give me the 3 mana Spellseeker.
I'm in.
Like,
I'm so
holy
in.
shit, that card would.
I'll pay 5 mana for it. I'm not. I'll be real with you. I'll pay 5 mana for that
Well,
card.
yeah, because you're reanimating it in, so you're not paying 5 mana.
Shh, don't tell anyone that. It's fine.
But usually it starts with that, and then I try to explore like something more subtle, more kind of the game as it progresses. These pieces are naturally finding themselves. I'm playing them. I think that's why I like Spellseeker lines with Displacer Kitten so much, because a lot of those cards that make the combo happen, your Eternal Witness, your Spellseeker, your Lurrus, like those are cards that you're gonna just play because they're good and they have decent enough utility, that also, when the stars align, aka Displacer Kitten, hits the battlefield, like it translates to a win pretty handily.
You want to know what makes me
What's
sad?
that?
Being told that I'm playing bad cards.
Ah,
I was
yes.
on Eternal Witness. I've been on Eternal Witness. I've been told this card is useless and that I should cut it. That it is a slow regrowth effect and not good multiple times. And we've talked about the Cloud Shift combo in a previous episode, and I'm sure we will again. So I won't cover that one. But I just wanted to bring up that there was a Kenrith deck that recently won a major tournament that was playing Eternal Witness, and I just want to throw that one out there. That the card is good.
You can't Displacer Kitten flicker a regrowth. You also get got by 90% of the counter magic in the format where you're playing specifically the card regrowth. You know what Eternal Witness doesn't crumple to? Dispel. Miscast.
True.
Like, do you have the force of will? Do you have the mana drain? Do you have the
You know what
delay?
regrowth effects you can't cast at instant speed?
Which
Regrowth.
that is
Regrowth.
very true.
You know what? You know what? The one instant speed regrowth effect that is commonly played in the format. We're not going to talk about Paradise Lost. You know what? Noxious Revival puts it on top of your library, which means that you have to
You have
draw
to
a card.
draw it.
You know what? Instant speed regrowth puts the card back into your hand and sets you up to win the game at instant speed as well. Necromancy,
Necromancy
Eternal
and
Witness.
Eternal Witness. No, that's true. That's very true. But I touched on this in episode 1 when we were covering win cons. But like, just tunneling in on the A plus B, like Thoracle Consult is the only thing this deck cares to do. I think that's fine. Like, it is proven time and time again that is like a potent strategy that you can do well with. But that potency comes from how linear that is, and once you know how to play around it, like, it kind of loses its allure. At least to me, it just becomes like another thing.
Personally, I think it gets boring.
It gets stale. Like, there's no dynamics to it. Like, oh, they had the endurance, or oh, I got turn the earth, or whatever.
Is it very good?
No,
Absolutely.
it's super.
Can't deny that Thoracle's
No,
good.
I will never say that it is bad. I think I might have said it's bad in the first episode. I can't. It probably, maybe that sounds like something I would say. But when I say bad, I mean in the context of, like, there are there are contextually better things that you could do, that play around different
Absolutely.
things that don't cause you to lose the game because you step 1 and step 2'd wrong. And that's where a lot of my frustration with the A plus B combo, like, tunnel in is like, you are only doing this. If you get stopped, you are dead. And I'm just like, that seems bad because
Yeah.
you're gonna get interacted a non-zero amount of times. And what happens when you get interacted those times? You have no chance of redemption.
You will also just win a certain number of
Oh,
games because you
absolutely,
just have it, or you've tried for it
absolutely.
enough times and you just get there, right?
That's the
But
other half of it.
that's
You're
yeah,
always fluctuating to two extremes. Hence why the mid-range singularity pulls everything into the center, and you cannot escape it.
true, true.
But yeah,
Um,
I and that's where Chainer comes in as like a very different Rakdos deck. I don't know. We'll talk about
yeah,
Chainer
you're
in its own.
attacking on a
Yeah,
very
we'll talk about Chainer
attack it
in own video.
very different axis. Good
Yeah,
deck, good deck.
good deck.
Um,
But it's that I don't know. I guess like utter repulsion I have to this hardcore linear strategy when we have a vintage card pool available. And I get that it's the best thing that you can do, but a deck is so much better when it has way more tools at its disposal. We have the most cards of all the constructed magic, and you want to play 3 cards that are very, very, very good. And I'm just like, you have so many more slots that are way more potent and way more flexible. Make use of them.
Definitely. I think that there's also a lot to be said for like I think it's been mentioned by many people many times, but I'll throw this one in the pool since we're talking about it, is like rogue deck construction. It's very useful. If you're playing a card that no one's expecting or you're playing a combo that people just don't know what it does, like that sometimes you'll just get there. And along with that, don't demonstrate the loop until like everyone knows it's a loop. Like if you're doing if I'm doing trying to do some sort of like displacer combo and people haven't seen it before, they'll be like, okay, like go off. Like I know they're sitting on a fluster storm and they're like, let me do my thing. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do this. And finally someone will catch on. Like, is this a loop? You're like, yeah, sure, I'll demonstrate a loop. And but now you have like 19 mana floating, and you're like, all right, sure, you can interact with me now. I'll go find another one who'll
Or
stop
you
me.
found your own Fluster Storm because you have Spellseeker in rotation and
Yeah,
you have
exactly.
packed backup.
Yeah, people are not quick to. A lot of people don't know all the metadata. They don't follow a lot of the obscure combos. They're like, oh yes, Thoracle is the only thing that can be done. Or it's like when I know what Winota does. It puts stuff into play and it hits me and resolves stacks
Mm-hmm.
pieces. It's like yes, that is true. There's dynamic to strategies. Like maybe you're playing Winota in the 99 of your Rocket
Holy
Looper, or
shit!
of your
Holy
you're playing Winota
god!
in the 99 of your Jetmeer deck. Like
Oh my god!
just dumping shit into play.
We have a couple of Rocco players, and I saw one of them just like have just like Rocco stuff on the board, and then they just went Winota on the stack, and I viscerally, utterly, audibly went, "What the fuck?" And I'm just like, cool. So if this spell resolves, they win the fucking game.
Dump everything into play. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just ugh.
Put their Moonblast Cleric into play. That's a half elf, so it's an elf and a human.
It's gross. It's so good. Okay, here's another fun one. Synergistic cards versus staples. In every deck, I think there is absolutely a balance to be achieved. Staple cards are staples for a reason. If you are playing a blue deck and have access to a Force of Will, run the Force of Will. There is no argument against that. Even if you are on like the tightest of blue pips in your deck, run the Force of Will.
Yeah, it's free. It's not
It's
going to
free.
tax your
Yeah,
pips.
Force of Negation. Yeah, that there's room in the argument for that there.
Some
Yeah,
lists, yes. Some lists,
some
no.
lists want it, some lists can't afford it, and that's I think totally fine. But like at least like Force of Will, uh yeah, no, like run that shit. Like if you're in black, you play the tutors. Imp Seal
Same
is
thing.
one of the more niche ones that I think fits into that like Force of Negation like discussion of like yeah, contextually it's really good, but like is it an auto include? Sometimes, sometimes, not really.
I mean, people will tell you imp seals and auto include. I don't know. Sorcery speed for a vamp tutor. I could just play like something that draws me more cards. It seems like it might be
Yeah,
better.
no, like but it's again, it's totally contextual. I think in decks,
Contextual.
in
Timna Malcolm. I'm going to play imp seal
oh
every
yeah,
time.
I think if you were in a Tymna deck, Seal is just as mandatory as Vamp Tutor.
It is tutor to hand.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
too
one
yeah.
black. Put it in your hand. But
But
yeah, really
then you
strong.
have other synergistic cards. Let's see. I don't know what's a good one. Okay, this is where it gets hard for me to describe like synergistic cards because that is context dependent based on the commander. I think actually no, I just thought of a good one. Training Grounds in Thrasios, I think, is a prime example of a synergy card. Like you don't play this deck in any, you don't play that card in anything else besides like Thrasios decks. I guess Springleaf Drum with Rograk decks also comes to mind as well. These kind
Absolutely.
of like payoff cards, like this, like I'm able to play these cards because I have A or B in the command zone. Like this is
Seedborn
Seedborn
Muse.
Muse,
That's a synergy card.
fantastic example. God, I wish I could consistently run in the dinosaur.
That taps your dinosaur. Isn't
It
that bad?
untaps the dinosaur, which is
Yeah.
it's fine if I have a tap effect out on the battlefield. If I don't, I never want to see a Seedborn Muse.
Absolutely. I think you can also look at synergy cards as like cards that are going to be in your main deck that are going to interact really really well together. So like for example, here's one that actually is good is this there's this new card coming out from March Machines called Fairy
Oh,
Mastermind.
yep.
Fairy Mastermind is a triggered ability. Whenever an opponent draws their second spell of a turn, you draw a card, which is a strong card. I think there's going to be a lot of debate about which decks want to run it, which decks it's a trap in. But a good example of a synergy card would be a wheel in that deck, or like Notion Thief and a wheel.
Yep.
Is you those are synergy cards, right? So like Notion Thief is that's probably going to win you the game, and that's the difference. There's like a slider on the strength of those synergies, but those would be synergies because if you wheel and there's a Notion Thief in play, you're going to draw 21 cards, right?
Mhm.
If you wheel and even if there's just a Mastermind in play, you draw 10 and all your opponents are only drawing 7. That seems really good.
Yeah,
If you ask me.
because it moves the advantage back towards you.
Yes,
Yeah, no,
yes,
I can definitely get around that. I'm gonna keep referencing Dinosaur until the day I die, but like there's a lot of like fun payoff cards in Dinosaur that I get to run, like Bolt Bend and Stubborn Denial. Like any commander that has,
Bolt Bend's a
oh
sweet
god,
card.
Bolt Bend is so, it's just second SWAT, and SWAT's already one of the most powerful interaction spells in the format.
I'm gonna spike the price on that card.
Oh,
It's only like 50 cents right now.
that's fine. Everyone deserves to play that card. But like I think like Stubborn Denial and Bolt Bend type effects I think are worth exploring if your commander has that like power in the command zone that like gives it the benefit. Again, it's like Springleaf Drum in your Rograk deck. Like you get to play this card because your commander allows you to do these things. That's where I think where a lot of the
Yes,
synergy comes in because I think in deck synergy, like main deck card synergies, I think that spirals more closer to packages and maybe lines, but that I think is a different school of thought.
I can see that.
Like Reanimate, for example, if you're running Reanimate, there's a good reason to run Entomb and then some sort of creature to like Entomb Reanimate with it, or even if you're just on Entomb Reanimate just because they're kind of generically good cards, say you're in a Breach deck, for example, like there's decent argument to run like an Entomb Reanimate turn one target, you know? Like 'cause sometimes
Absolutely, yeah.
Consecrated Sphinx. Oh my god, if you Entomb Reanimate a Consecrated Sphinx on turn one, you have won the game.
That yeah, that sounds disgusting. Of course, that's when Rograk was going first, and they like deadly rollick
Oh
it.
yeah,
But
of
you know,
course. Every time.
that's the one game where they're like, yeah, Rograk missed my land drop and
Yeah,
pass after
no,
mulling to like
or the
three.
mono red
We
player
reanimate it, and they just
or the
exile
mono red
your
player has the
guy.
red blast for the Consecrated Sphinx.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like
it's really
ideas like
tough.
that, you know, like there are reasons to play a lot of cards that I think are very underexplored.
Absolutely.
No, Bolt Bend is every single time I have Bolt Bend in my hand and I have a dinosaur on the battlefield, I'm like, oh yeah, I love running two swats.
Talking about deck building philosophy, here's a good one for
Mhm.
you. How many win conditions are you playing in a deck, and what dictates that?
Ooh, that's a good question. So the deck that I have the most like brew power put into and just the most brain power put into is Chainer. So I'll just use that as an example. But I run two actual win conditions. I'm defining a win condition here as something that, if resolves, wins the game. And those two things being Dualcaster and Necrotic Ooze. Like those are the ways that they win the game. Technically, Necrotic Ooze, the card that wins the game most frequently, is Mog Fanatic, but usually it's those two. And then there's a bunch of like kind of flow charty, spider webby win cons that those allow themselves to do. The deck also makes use of Underworld Breach as a way to find those pieces. Again, that's kind of that example of if your breach resolves and you have your parts, it doesn't matter if you have the LED and the wheel because you were resolving a breach anyway.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter. I think I use an example of like a window and a rock. Like if the rock gets through the window, it don't matter. It just doesn't matter. Like the rocks through the
Yeah.
window. But generally, I hover between like two to three, depending on the deck. Cards that will actually win me the game, and then a bunch of other like support pieces to either find it or resolve it, or kind of like that flowcharty spiderwebby type of thing. Dockside and Mayhem Devil Enchainer, for example, that is like plan D, I think, in the deck. I haven't actually sat down to chart out all of the ways that deck can win. But that is one of like the pocket things of like I'm just gonna resolve dockside triggers a lot and have a Mayhem Devil, and then I'm just gonna swing at you guys because I have done like 15 points of damage to everybody.
Right. So aside from combat damage, but I think so for me, I
You're on a lot more win cons than me though.
no, I'm not. That's the thing. Is like I'm a big fan of those spiderwebby like weaves together type deals, but I think realistically, I think I play at least in my main deck. I play 3 win conditions, and I will never go over 3 win conditions because after that things start to get really diluted. Like you can't layer effectively after 3, and even at 3, things I feel can get tricky. And like even going into 3, like sometimes I'm like, why am I running this card? And then I like play a game and I'm like, oh, that's why I'm running this card. But even then, it's like there are times when I question like how strong is this really, or is it just to enable this other like 1 win condition? But so I'm on dockside loops,
Mm-hmm.
which I count as one
Mm-hmm.
because they all require a
Yep.
dockside, and I'm on
Mm-hmm.
dualcaster, and then I'm on displacer loops
Mm-hmm.
because displacer doesn't need a dockside extortionist to win. There are 2 or 3 other things you can use, but it's that type of deal where it's like I'm never going to play when I assemble a deck. My philosophy is I'm going to decide on somewhere between 2 and 3 win conditions because I'm at least for me I'm not going to play a deck that only plays 1 win condition, whether that is Thoracle Labman or like Kiki combo or something else. I'm playing a deck that is going to have at least 2 because if one of my pieces gets exiled to like somebody jams a rest in peace at a very inopportune time and it's either already in the bin or like my hand gets wheeled into a Dathi or something, I'm not getting those pieces back. I can't win the game short of combat damage.
It's making your deck still live.
Yeah, it's that resiliency effect, which I'm a big fan of the resiliency factor. And so I will always play at least 2, but sometimes 3 can be good if you can make your deck weave and layer really well.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like I'm on a Mayhem Devil Dockside loop in Kenrith because that wins the game. And it's really efficient, and Mayhem Devil's a great card, and Dockside's a great card that wins with other pieces as well. But I'm also playing like Dualcaster Saw, but Dualcaster Saw can also win the game even without combat damage if you have like a Mayhem Devil in play and one thing to sacrifice because you can make a billion Mayhem Devils and crack your Lotus Petal and then kill everybody, right?
Yep.
So there's that.
Yep.
That whole idea, and then like going even further is like displacer lions are great because you can win the game with Dockside Extortionist, but you can also win the game with Mayhem Devil, but you can also win the game, and it just the list goes on,
And
right?
in Kenrith specifically, Dockside Sonhalf is so just like if you're on the dork package, it's so disgusting. I think like the week after Sonhalf got legal and we all were like playtesting the shit out of it, you
Oh,
went for Dualcaster Saw, and I'm like, okay, everything's on the stack
I
right
didn't
now.
speech.
And I didn't
It was in response to somebody else doing
and
something.
I'm just like I'm surveilling the board, and I see you have an ignoble hierarch that is not summoning sick, and I went, "Holy shit, we're dead here."
Yeah.
Do you want to walk through that particular line?
Sure. So I came up with that one, and I call it the I need a volunteer
Mm-hmm.
combo, because like saw and half, showmanship, all
Yep,
that
yep, yep.
shenanigans, right? But basically, so you do your execute your basic saw and half dual caster mage combo, where you stick saw and half on the stack, hold priority, cast dual caster mage, ETB trigger, target your saw and half your dual caster mage, two triggers, both target saw, copy saw and half. Each of them targets a new dual caster mage. You make a billion copies of Saw and Half on the stack. And once you get to the point where you put like a billion copies of Saw and Half on the stack at the same time, you can start sawing in half more dual caster mages. But also, you can tap your not summoning stick ignoble hierarch for a red, and then saw it in half, making 2 tokens that are copies of ignoble hierarch. Right? You saw those in half, you saw those in half, and you like it goes off exponentially, which we love. We love that term, but it goes off exponentially, makes a like another billion, million, trillion, whatever copies of Ignoble Hierarch that are all summoning sick. And then you use your 1 red to activate Kenrith's first ability, which gives creatures haste trample until end of turn. So now all of your mana dorks can immediately tap for
Oh, would
mana.
you look at that? We've
Um,
just assembled infinite mana and instant speed.
Yo, that's crazy. With my 1 mana dork, and so at that point, if you have another, you can hold priority on a dual caster trigger targeting a saw in half to, like, if you have a dork that taps for blue, whether it's a Birds of Paradise, a Noble Hierarch, an Arbor Elf, if you have a tropical island in play or something like that, you can reanimate that with your infinite black mana that you've just made with all your mana dorks, and you can now stick that mana dork into play, continue the loop because your trigger on Dualcaster resolves copying the saw, making copies of that again, and since it makes infinite red, and then you can go and deck everyone out at instant speed by using infinite blue. Or you could put like infinite power on your guys and like maybe find a way to do that, or crazy things. There are a
It's
bunch of
Kenrith with
crazy things you
infinite
can do.
mana. Like there are nearly
Yeah,
infinite ways to
you
win.
stick a lightning bolt on the stack and you can reanimate your Dualcaster, and now
Hell,
you can put
if
infinite
someone else
copies of
puts a
both on
bolt
the
on the
stack.
stack, you can saw Dualcaster on the top of it and kill the table that
I
way.
I think that might have been what it was. Is I think somebody stuck a bolt on the stack, and that's what I went off the top over because that was my
I think
outlet.
so.
Um,
I have attempted that line many a time, and every single time I've attempted it, it feels very good. I usually get stopped though because it's a wrong time or I just got essentially. But
yeah,
even still, just having that option is
trick
it's
play.
oh god. Even still, just having that option is just great. Yeah, no, it's saw Dualcaster. I'm gonna fail the bad combo allegations because it's great. It's wonderful.
It's and both the pieces are super flexible, super
That's
flexible.
actually something that I'm surprised we haven't talked about. That's taken us this long to get to. Me and you are big proponents of the very simple idea of card quality up. Uh,
Yes,
the idea of we don't want to compromise the slots in our deck playing cards that are only good when we are already in a winning position or are trying
demonic
demonic
consultation.
consultation. Or like the cards that are essentially win more. Like I think there's a lot of cards that people play that are win more in the format. Consultation being our shining example of that card.
I don't know if that was win more, but it is a terrible card to play.
It's
It is
yeah,
it's the quality of that
the
card is
quality of the card is
awful.
good. It is only a good card when you are winning the game. And I think me and you shy away from a lot of those cards that are exclusively good in particular circumstances or when those cards find other cards. Twin Flame, I think, skates by just because it has a decent amount of utility, because at the very least it can copy a Dockside, which there is
Yeah,
merit to doing at the very least that. But cards that are more flexible, more utility based, are always going to win out over the cards that just win the game and do literally nothing else. And I refuse to
absolutely.
listen to the argument of demonic consultation finds my force of will. Yeah, some of the times. Then other times you lose the game because you put it on the stack when you weren't winning, and then you lost
Right,
because you
right.
exiled everything. Oh,
I mean,
nice,
I've
nice,
been told
nice, nice one win con in Thorkel. You just exiled it, by the way. Good luck winning. I
that's
hope you got Crom in the
really
command
tough.
zone.
I've heard like Dualcaster Saw is it's slow. It's not as good as Twin Flame,
No,
and it's like, yeah,
no.
sure, that's true. But Saw and Half is a better card on the whole. It's an instant. It's 3 mana, which is rough with Spellseeker, like we
Hmm.
mentioned earlier. But like sometimes it makes 2 Drannith Magistrates when somebody tried to remove one, and you just really need to make sure that nobody's breaching right
Yeah.
now. Or sometimes it replaces an opposition agent. Sometimes I've had this happen to me. You go to combat for lethal, and somebody saws in half your biggest guy, removing it from combat. And sure, you get 2 of them, but he's not a dad no more, and that's really
that sounds
sad.
particular.
It's a very particular time. I was swinging for lethal Kenrith damage, and I was like, I will attack. And this person had no blockers, and they were like, please don't. And I was like, no, I'm going to. And they're like, okay, saw in half. And I still won the game on that turn because they used all their mana
Yeah.
saw the Kenrith and live. And I didn't remove my Kenrith. Like I was still able to like sink it and stuff, even through a Drannith Magistrate. But it was one of those things where it's like the card is just objectively better than Twin Flame in that
Yeah.
respect. It's like I'm going to make 2 of these, or I really need counter spells here. I'm going to saw in half my spell seeker in response to your spell. And get like my misstep, and I'll also get like a pact of negation or like a cloud shift or something at that point. It's like now I just have utility, right?
It's
Uh
disgusting. It's just gross.
yeah. Yeah.
As our resident Rakdoser, I feel really powerful when I have both Dockside and Saw in half when I'm doing anything like post Pier or even like
Oh, combo's so
or even
good.
post Nas. Like the whole point when I'm in that stage is like, okay, cool. How do I resolve both a Dockside, have Saw in half available, and be also able to have this like third thing I'm also gonna do that I'm gonna bait out interaction with, and then in response, I'm gonna saw my dock side to get two more dock sides and make another 10 mana just out of nowhere when you thought I was already pinned, but I actually didn't
Yep.
have a choke point at all. I just need you to use your interaction.
Interact.
Yeah, I just need
Yeah.
you to do
Just need you to put your spell
anything,
on the
just
stack.
something.
Well, that and the sweet thing about Dualcaster, once again,
Guard quality.
card quality up, is if somebody else puts like their tutor on the stack, like as a displacer deck, if somebody puts a quarter calling on
Oh
the stack,
baby, oh baby.
or like an Eldritch at sacking my Archivist or something, I cannot wait to flash in Dualcaster Mage, copy your thing, put my displacer kitten into play, cast the thing, flicker my guy, copy your cord again, put my spell seeker into play, and just win over the top of you. I'll turn your maybe win condition, maybe tutor for a stack piece, whatever. I'm gonna turn my dual caster into a 1 card win condition because you attempted to advance your game
Mhm.
plan.
I mean, also, Dualcaster Mage is mostly an uncounterable counter spell.
For the
For
most
the
part,
most
yeah, for
part,
sure.
it is a great way to win a counter war.
Yeah, it also like you can like the dual caster combos go off through deafening silence. Like not all rule of laws, sure. In Kenrith they do because you put your spell on the stack and you reanimate your dual caster mage.
Mhm.
But like sometimes it's like deafening silence has been around since literally turn one, and you just go saw hold priority dual caster, make infinite guys, and now you have infinite mana, or you just have an army at the end step to untap and kill everybody.
Yeah, card quality up for your win cons is always going to be good, and I feel like the format is slowly moving towards that. Either that or
Well, we've heard it for forever,
we've heard it
right?
for
Like Blue
forever.
Farm, card
Yeah.
quality up, 5 color, card quality up. Like, and that's true. Like a lot of those decks do play better cards than like 1 or 2 color decks can, for sure. I played Urza for the longest time. Card quality in that deck is terrible. Like a lot of synergy with your
A lot of
commander,
synergy.
right? But the quality, I will cast my Urza's Bauble, and it will tap for blue mana. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. I have 2 cards in my
That's
hand, and I will pass.
that's your synergy. That's your payoff for being a Urza player. Is you are just going to run a lot of Mock Sapphire type effects. Hey, did you know running a lot of 0 mana artifacts that produce mana is a very good thing for a deck to do? Because it is,
I It's very strong right up until your opponent goes Dockside
and you
Extortionist and you
don't have
start
the counter
crying.
spell
Or Torpor Orb or
or the
whatever,
dress
and you just
down
start
or the whatever.
wanting to die. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a problem that plagues a lot of the lower anything sub 3 colors. Like that problem plagues it. Is just you're locked into certain colors. You're not going to have the freedom of other things. You know, if you're without black, your win cons are going to be harder to find. You know, if you're without blue,
True.
you're gonna be without a lot of protection most of the time. If you don't have white to lean on for like stacks effects, if you don't have red, you don't have Dockside, one of the best cards in the format.
Thankfully, I think uh, for all of their sins, Wizards has done a relatively good job of if they're printing lower colored legendary creatures or cards that can be your commander, unless it's like a commander specific product, they tend to make those cards stronger. They have stronger
Oh,
effects, so you
absolutely,
can play more highly synergistic cards. For
absolutely.
example, Yuriko, Winota, great examples. Urza, great example. Like those cards have very, very strong synergies with the strategies that they want to employ and with the cards in those colors, which is fantastic. Even though like the quality of those cards might be lower, the because of the fewer colors that they're permitted to run.
And then that's always going to be an age-old debate of like synergy versus individual card quality. Like that's a debate that's been going on longer than CDH has been a thing. And it depends on the format, it depends on the deck, card pool, card choice, all that stuff. But like I still think, you know, like those low color, high synergy decks that have a lot of payoff are very potent in our CDH. I think a lot of people just kind of look at low color identity, and if you aren't, you know, Yuriko, Winota,
I cringe.
Urza, like you kind of go, well, what are you doing? There's so many other cards you could play, and you go, well, yeah, but there are like ABC 1, 2, 3, like all of these things that you cannot do, and you are going to be very unlikely to stop me because of the strategies that these commanders enable.
I see fewer than 3 colors, and I pretty much just click to the next page.
Yeah, well, you're also like you. you you just played
I want it all.
your first non-blue deck like the other week.
Yep, good old Rurik Thar. We mentioned him episode 1.
Uh,
That deck was hella fun. It did work too.
I'm
Did a lot
very
of work.
shocked at how well it did and how well it performed.
I'm not gonna lie, me too. I was like, this will take them out of my storm, and then it actually did, and I was like, I was not expecting this outcome.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's crazy. All right, I have a couple more. I don't think are going to be super long and super in depth conversation topics.
Let's hear
Light
them.
and asymmetrical stacks pieces. Just run them.
Play
Just run
them.
them.
Just
Just
play
run
them.
them.
Just
There's
play them.
there's no argument. Like if you're
Are you playing? Are you playing red black and you're trying to fill up slots in your 2 or 3 color list? Play Mayhem Devil.
yeah,
Are you playing blue white and you are trying to fill up slots to your 2 or 3 color list? Just play Lavinia. Just do it. It's
it's
asymmetrical.
asymmetrical.
Do
If
it.
you are in white, there is literally no argument to not play Drannith Magistrate. If you are in black, there is literally no argument to not play Opposition Agent. Like
Yep.
they're
Yep.
end of discussion. Like you play those.
End of
You
discussion.
play those cards.
Unfortunately, those cards are what we would call, along with Mana Cryptid Soul Ring in 99% of decks, and auto include.
They are unfortunately really good cards for a very good reason. They are really good
Yeah.
at stopping other people.
And the rates for them are exceptional.
They are exceptional. I mean, like even to like some lower degrees, like if your deck can afford to play like Curse Totem and Grafdigger's Cage, just play them.
Oh yeah, you can be on Breach, but like if Breach is not your primary game plan, play Grafdigger's Cage, my guy. Like that card is insane and it hoses. I would add a rough estimate hose about 85 to 90% of the meta.
It hoses so goddamn much. Grafdigger's Cage is like an absurd magic card for stopping.
And you get to play 2 copies if you're willing to wait a turn or 2. Urza Saga puts that bad boy right onto the battlefield.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, no, like just if you can afford to play these things that hurt other people substantially more than you and or are asymmetrical, just play them. End of discussion.
Yep.
And then the next one is Dorks versus Rocks. That's mostly a meta call, I'd say, and kind of a
deck style.
Yeah, and deck style. I mean, there are.
If you're playing Neoform, you should probably be on more Dorks than you are
Absolutely.
Rocks.
If you're on blue green, you're playing Neoform. If you're on Neoform, you should be playing most of the Dorks that are available to you. If you're in colors that can support all of the color shifting green Dorks, play them. If you are not, at least play Llanowar, Findhorn, and Elvish Mystic. Running Bird's Paradise. If you're in black, you're running Deathrite Shaman. If you have access to the Hierarchs, play the Hierarchs. Avacyn's Pilgrim.
Yep.
Play the Avacyn's Pilgrim. If you have access to like Neoform type effects, it's just good. But even then, like it depends on what you're trying to do. I think if you are a deck that is on Nas or Bolas's Citadel or Pier, you're going to lean more on the Rocks just because you need those cards to play out your hand. But even still, like if you want to like shave Dorks for like Rocks, like that's totally fine. It's meta. It's a meta call. If you're fearing, if Dockside is like a huge prevalent thing for you, you're gonna lean more towards. You're gonna play fewer Rocks. You're gonna lean more on Dorks. If you're not,
if you're okay with trading speed for the ability to dodge Dockside, you can play Dorks. If you want higher speed, even if you're in like blue green, I don't know what deck that would be,
Kinnan.
but if you wanted a higher speed, Kinnan, yeah. I mean, Kinnan plays both, but yeah, play more Rocks.
Yeah. I feel like that one's like, again, that's pretty open and shut. Like the deck is going to, like, as you're building the deck, like you're gonna feel out like, okay, I should probably be on more Dorks or more Rocks. Like that's pretty easy, I think, to figure out.
And then it sounded like you had one more.
Not really. Those were the main ones.
Okay.
I had another one that's like, how much tech is too much tech?
Oh yeah, you did mention that.
Yeah.
Too much tech is when you can stop everyone from winning, but you can't close the game. I have hit this wall many times. I will not lose, but I will not win. I live in that you just draw every game, and then you go play the next one.
No, I love tech. I love playing these weird oddball cards. I'm like, oh yeah, but if Magical Christmas
is a good gate god.
If I'm in Magical Christmas Land, this card is sick as hell.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Like if you have issues like closing out the game from like pretty commanding pretty commanding positions, yeah, you're on too much tech. But
Yeah,
hey,
but I
I
think that's
love
pretty much
tech.
it.
I'll always respect the tech move over the win move personally, but that's just
Respect the
I
tech.
respect the
Honestly,
tech.
if your opponent sauces on you, you should just concede.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you get got by this card, you're like, oh fuck it, you're
Just
right.
bow out.
Yeah. Oh god, this Yuriko player is on like the 13 CMC card. Oh, like yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I have just about covered all I want to cover.
Yes, I think we've touched on all of the points that I had set aside to cover in this episode as well. So mostly just make sure that you're if to distill the whole episode down to like 2 or 3 sentences is assess your win cons, determine your play style. I guess flip those. Determine your play style, and if you're especially if you're trying to pick a deck that will win, choose a deck that synergizes with your play style. So do your water definition test, whatever that happens to be. Figure out if you're like a control player, stacks player, turtle player, whatever that is. Choose a deck, build there. Once you decide on your deck to build, pick your win conditions. And then once you've picked your win conditions and chosen the commander to support those, make sure that you're selecting cards that synergize with your commander, as well as cards that are just like staples and really strong. And then throw in a little bit of spicy tech in there so that good opponents who are respectful concede.
That about hits what I would want to distill down to. Yeah, I nailed it. Absolutely nailed
Nailed
it.
it. Cha-ching. All
Cha-ching.
right. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us here at Mana on the Rocks. Thank you for listening. I hope you are having a fantastic day wherever you find yourself. And we'll catch you next time.